This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Walking on holy ground. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. What is holy ground? Where do we find this concept in the Bible? And why do supernatural things tend to happen more often in some places in the Bible, and maybe we'll even touch on elsewhere, than other places? But before we get to our guest tonight and dive in, just taking a moment to remind you, please, first of all, thank you for taking the time out to watch or listen to this program. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, share that with your friends, and then go to gilberthouse.org/app and download our free app, because at some point it is highly probable that I'll say something or a guest will say something that will violate the community standards. And all of the content that you see on YouTube or that you get from our any of the podcatchers where we put the audio versions of these programs will always be at our app. The content is hosted by a Christian company called Subsplash, and they are not interested in censoring our content. So it comes straight to you, bypasses the gatekeepers of big tech and social media, and is available for iOS, Android, and Amazon Kindle Fire phones and tablets. Now, if you want to send it right to your big screen TV, like the one you see over my shoulder here, you can use the Roku version or Apple TV version of our app. It is called Gilbert House Ministries. You'll find it at the Apple iTunes Store. Is that what they're calling it? No, the App Store. Google's Play Store. And, of course, it's also in the Channel Store for Roku, the App Store for the Apple TV as well. You'll find them all there. But to make it easy, we've got links to those app stores at our website. So instead of trying to remember all that, just go to gilberthouse.org/app and get the app. Well, joining us for another fascinating Iron and Myth discussion, the director of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, that is, and the author of Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim, Dr. Judd Burton, best-selling author, award-winning screenwriter, and the screenwriter of the, shall we say, provocative film My Son Hunter, Brian Godawa, and the author of the book The Angel of the Lord, a Biblical, Historical, and Theological Study, and Giants, Sons of the Gods, now available in a 10th anniversary revised and expanded edition. The pastor of Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in Boulder, Pastor Doug Van Dorn. Well, fellas, I really don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I just know it's going to be interesting, because this is a subject that can lead to a lot of speculation, but there's no denying the history that certain things happened in certain places. And certainly when you're talking about Jesus and where he chose to base his ministry, where he got baptized, we think, and certainly where he declared his divinity, those happen at places that have a long history of spiritual significance. And a lot of those areas, especially where Jesus based his ministry, were in the northern part of Israel, the Galilee. Judd, you posted something to Facebook just a week before we recorded this program about the spiritual significance, the history of the Galilee. What is your take on it? Why was that region so important?
Well, the context of the post was that so much of Jesus' ministry took place in the Galilee, right in his own backyard. And for listeners of this show and of related content, we know that the Galilee has a long history of supernatural darkness, spanning back arguably to prehistory. If we look at not only the archaeological record, but also the text that preserve these ostensibly pre-flood traditions. But as far as like the historical or archaeological context, there's certainly a profusion of evidence of all manner of cult sites and dolmens and high places preserved not only in the archaeological record, but even the historical geography of the Galilee itself.
Now, when you're talking about the Galilee, you're including that region all the way up to, say, Dan at the foot of Mount Hermon?
Right. Which would today technically be Upper Galilee, but it's still part of the larger this ground zero, because it encompasses so much of the Amorite religion, the Phoenician religion, the Canaanites, um, the Mount Hermon event, Genesis 6 event, of course, takes place here. The preservation of that legacy in places like, notably Paneas, Caesarea Philippi. So there are a host of threads that we could pull on this evening, just in the Galilee, and kind of also talk a little bit about the tools from sacred geography that are valuable in understanding not only the mundane but the cosmic significances of the geographical issues that we'll talk about.
Yeah, in Isaiah 9, he makes reference to the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, or Galilee of the Gentiles. So suggesting that region east of the Jordan River, north of the Sea of Galilee, because the way of the sea is the Roman road, the Via Maris, that ran through the Hula Valley up to about Hatzor and then branched off to the northeast to go to Damascus. So the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, would suggest that as far back as the 8th century BC, that what we would consider Bashan may also have been tagged with that name, Galilee, or Galilee of the Gentiles. And
and I mean, even in the name Galilee, you have the sort of linguistic raw materials from which to backtrack, words like Golan or Jolan, playing fast and loose with the vowels as you can, and language families from that part of the world. So there's a long line of preservation there, again, as you point out, not only in the text and the religious tradition, but also in the place names for these regions.
So going back into prehistory, one of the places that we visited, Doug, during the recent tour of Israel was several places in that general region. Of course, Gilgal Rephaim, which is 10 miles east of the Sea of Galilee, pretty clearly in the middle of what was ancient Bashan. But the similar monument, Khirbet Beteha, on the east bank of the Jordan, about 2 miles north of the Jordan River, that would be considered part of the Galilee. But then, as we've learned here in recent months, that valley, the Hula Valley, is surrounded by more than 1,000 dolmens on the hills on either side, the mountains of Naphtali on the west and the Golan Heights on the east. And that region just north of the Sea of Galilee, near the ancient city of Chorazin, has more than 400 dolmens clustered right there, just north of the Sea of Galilee, very close to, well, not that far really from Bethsaida, just the opposite side of the river, a few miles away. So there appears to be this cluster of monuments to the cult of the dead between the Sea of Galilee and Mount Hermon. And of course, we visited the big daddy of dolmens there at the Shamir dolmen field, just outside the Shamir kibbutz, with the 50-ton capstone, the one with the inscriptions on the underside, the petroglyphs. So there's something there that goes back to as far back as 6,000 years ago, about 4,000 BC, according to Dr. Michael Freakman, who did the digs at Gilgal Rephaim and Khirbet Beteha and the Serpent Mound of Bashan. So since they hadn't invented writing yet, we can only speculate as to what it was they were trying to do there. But let's speculate. What was it that they were trying to do there?
Well, the preservation of the legacy of the Watcher event, for one. Doug and I are talking about this almost daily. At least we have been this week. So much so that I had dubbed us the Dukes of Hermon, and sort of as a trip to the Dukes of Hermon.
That's it. You need a logo and T-shirts. That's awesome.
Well, bring us up to speed on your discussion then.
Well, Doug, do you want to? I'll hand the baton to you, and we'll sort of take it back and forth.
Daisy Duke, Daisy Doug,
Daisy Doug.
Daisy Doug. I think you have your genders confused there, Brian. Are we?
These are confusing days.
Anymore.
Yeah,
that's true.
We're in a post-gendered world.
That's the only name I know from that show. So I wonder why.
Well, this kind of, Judd and I are working on a paper or a book really on the Serpent Mound and the stuff surrounding it. So we're trying to figure out a lot of the sacred geography in the beginning of this discussion to set up, what is the mound? Why is it there? And the wheel obviously plays a huge part in that because it's right next to it. So, I've been also preaching through Luke because I'm a pastor and just going through the weekly grind. And for whatever reason, Luke 8 and 9 is just completely about sacred geography. I mean, he's there calming the storm on the sea and, the whole Leviathan idea, and then healing demon-possessed people by the sea. And then he goes up and feeds the 5,000. And it struck me that the feeding of the 5,000, we actually did kind of a Iron and Myth Light, Brian, 2 weeks ago, because I needed to get this off my chest to kind of talk with some of the guys that I think could figure it out. And it was in the middle of the day. So just kind of spur of the moment. And people can go back and listen to that to get more of this. But it seems like it's a very real possibility that Jesus actually took the people to Kerbet Batah for the feeding of the 5,000, which of course would be very near where he was baptized. It could be right near the place where he was tempted to turn the stones into bread. And one of the things that kind of struck my mind was that Dr. Friedman said they found two petroglyphs there. One was a petroglyph of a serpent, and the other one was a petroglyph of a fish. And so, sacred geography of that area, what are they doing? What could these two different wheels be thinking about? And Jen and I have talked quite a bit about the Ouroboros idea, the tail eater, the fish, the serpent tail eater, and how that symbolizes a whole bunch of things, actually. There's Leviathan symbolism there. There is galactic symbolism there because it's the Milky Way kind of idea that you get from David Flynn. There's fertility ideas with the serpent mound and the wheel, kind of a sperm egg sort of a thing, all kinds of things. So, what are they doing? Well, all these things kind of seem to circulate around what happened on Mount Hermon with the Watchers. I found a thing this week that said Eusebius was talking about a 1200 BC historian from Phoenicia who called the Watchers creatures that look like eggs. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So, we see the serpent mound with the egg, swallowing the egg idea. It's more fertility symbolism, the beginning of the giant seed and that kind of stuff. So, and there's so many things that are probably going on with these monuments, especially the circular monuments. But it, like Judd said, it seems to be going back to the Genesis 6 thing.
Mike Friedman was. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that I probably should interject a kind of footnote in terms of the subject of sacred geography. That's what makes this study really interesting, because sacred geography is really comprised of three different parts. It's on one level, it's cosmic geography, so it's a sort of conceptualized landscape, if you will, of the unseen realm. And then you have the ritual space in mundane places on the earth, is a second layer of sacred geography that it's sort of sacralized by religious activity, ritual ceremony, etc. And then you have where those two, the third part, which it's just sort of taken as implicit by a lot of scholars. The third part is where those two intersect. And you could sort of think about that in preternatural terms, where both scholars would say the sacred and the mundane sort of come together. And so there are these multiple layers of meaning that Doug and I have been teasing out in the Serpent Mound and its relationship to Gilgal, Rephaim, and going back to not only the place of the Genesis 6 event, but also the time. So we're we're working not only with sacred space, but we're working with sacred time as well, or what Derek, what Sharon might call infernal space or infernal time, since we're dealing with the Watcher progeny and whatnot. But a lot of this sort of religious mapping as a discipline, and I don't want to get too diffuse on this, but it's pertinent to the discussion here in terms of the mechanics. A lot of the process begins with what's known as ecclesiastical geography, where in particular, beginning with early church fathers and the earliest of the Eastern monks, mapping out pilgrim stops is evidence in the earliest of this kind of religious mapping, and over the centuries has grown into this largely comparative study called sacred geography. And a lot of the notable scholars have come out of the University of Chicago History of Religions program, going all the way back to people like Mircea Eliade and Jonathan Z. Smith, who actually has looked at a lot of the sacred geography and the biblical tradition. And those are some of the thinkers that influenced me, particularly Jonathan Z. Smith. But all that aside, these are the various layers that we're working with in sacred geography, and all of the mythological symbolism and textual relations that are sort of brought along with it in terms of the kind of intellectual baggage that's saddled with the discipline of sacred geography.
One of the things that I thought really fascinating was the analysis of Dr. Michael Freakman, and he really gets a lot of credit for being willing to dig at Gilgal Rephaim. I suspect there are a lot of archaeologists who would be really interested in doing work there, but don't want to be connected with a site that is going to wind up featured on Ancient Aliens at some point. But he looked at the relationship of that site, the wheel, in conjunction with the spaces around it. And he was the first one to actually map the settlements in that part of the Golan Heights based on their period of history. He did this for his dissertation, then he wrote another paper on it later, and showed that the original dating of Gilgal Rephaim, which was, I think, Middle Bronze Age, which is roughly the time of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, was much too late because there weren't any settlements near that location in the Middle Bronze for men to physically walk, pick up rocks and stack them according to the plan that somebody had developed. That the only period of time where that could have happened is the Chalcolithic Age, the Copper Age, pre-3500 BC. And then he used another method to test the age. He come up with a final age of about 3710 BC, give or take 180 years or something. So, but he also found that there was another structure there that's just called Building C that looks like a big circle. Apparently, there was another circular-shaped structure on that location that had been dismantled and the stones reused. He looked at the archaeoastronomy and found that there is a slit in the wall just above the entrance to the central core, where the sun shines through and lands on a threshold stone on the summer solstice. But there are two gates in the outer ring at Gilgal Rephaim, and that has puzzled archaeologists. What do they point to? It doesn't quite point to the summer solstice or the equinox or anything, or the equinoxes or anything like that. So they couldn't figure out what it was until he stood on the central core and looked to the horizon and found that the gate in the northeast centers exactly on an extinct volcano called Tel Ferez, and to the southeast, another extinct volcano called Tel Saki. And then he goes in to explain in his paper that in Sumerian, the word for mountain, Ker, is identical to the word for netherworld. So believing, and this is the evidence that he presents to argue that this site is connected to the cult of the dead, veneration of the ancestors. He also points out that at Khirbet Beteha, that there's the gate there is oriented at an azimuth of 7 degrees, so just slightly off of due north, and that centers on the highest peak in the vicinity of Khirbet Beteha, And I wish I'd remembered that and the stuff about the petroglyphs while we were there, Doug, but I'd forgotten. Went back and looked at it again. So, there is a third site that nobody knows about that's only got a name called Site 133, because that's what it was given when they did the survey of the Golan Heights. Similar to Khirbet Beteha and Gilgal Rephaim, concentric rings around a central tumulus with one gate in the outside. But like Khirbet Beteha, which is on the bank of the Jordan River, this is on a hill overlooking a river east of the town of Katzrin in the Golan Heights. So there seems to be some connection, because there's also a stream that runs right past Gilgal Rephaim, the Daliot stream. It's a real small little water course. We were able to walk across it stepping on stones. But the fact that you've got three of these things within 10 miles of each other that are all like right next to a water course also seems to suggest something.
Mm.
I mean, it's sort of a river Styx sort of thing, a liminal boundary between this world and the next, perhaps.
That's what I was thinking of is, correct me if I'm wrong, Judd, but, we're kind of talking on a level of some culture, some point in time in the past, considering a certain place to be sacred for whatever reason. But it seems to me that there's some things that are going on before that, such as just basic concepts like you just brought up the river Styx, a kind of a geographical concept of the other world, how it links itself to this world, talking about the gates of hell at the cave of Pan. That's not something anybody put there, but it's sacred geography just for the fact of what they thought that it was. And the whole idea of like a cosmic mountain where the gods would meet, and it would be an intercessory place between heaven and earth, or like a sacred tree, a world tree sort of a thing. So, you've got these kinds of preliminary, worldview thoughts that go into where they end up putting stuff and why they end up putting stuff where they put them. And then it's on top of this that the New Testament and the Old Testament, for that matter, why things end up happening the way, where they happen and why they happen.
Yeah,
and it's obviously not Galilee, right?
Yeah, the river Styx symbolism is certainly at Peneus. The Greeks saw that, and they would have immediately thought river Styx because it's entering. It's part of that cave system there. Which they, again, associated entrances of caves with things like entrances to the underworld. But this association with waterways in the underworld, of course, as we know from the material that we all deal with, is cross-cultural. You find it in the Apsu of Mesopotamia. You find it, the Vodun practitioners in Haiti believe that their gods lived under the water. The Cherokee in North America believed that waterways, or in general, the direction west was the direction of the land of the dead, but waterways in particular, pointing that way, led to the underworld. And so that precedent is there, but to draw it back towards not just the Greco-Roman concept, but even older pagan concepts that rivers were associated with, rivers and waterways were associated with the underworld, and that is all at play on multiple levels. Not only at Peneus, you could even argue the Hula Valley as well.
Mm. Doug, you did some really great work on a paper that you put out a couple of years ago on the origin of the word behind the origin of the words in Eurasia for king or royalty, and tracing it back to phonemes that led also to the Semitic words Rapayuma and Rephaim, tracing it back to the land between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus. And of course, that's where the mountains of Ararat are located. So interestingly, the Hurrian people who originated from that area in the middle of the 5th millennium BC, that's as far back as they can trace that unique pottery style that the Hurrians had developed. They had an idea of a divine watercourse that in their writing, the Sumerian logogram basically was called the Kaskal Kur, and roughly translates into English as divine watercourse. In fact, there's a treaty between one of the kings of the Hittites and a prince of Wilusa, which is ancient Troy, named Alexandu. Alexander of Troy. It just happens to be the name of, the other name of Paris, the one who stole Helen from Menelaus and started that war. Alexandu of Wilusa signed a treaty, and it was witnessed by the deity Cascal Kur, this divine watercourse or road that leads to the netherworld. A kind of an early form, I guess, of the idea of the river Styx. Which makes you wonder about that space on the top of Mount Hermon that was scooped out like a bowl that Sir Charles Warren discovered in 1869. When you climb the summit, you have to circumambulate because there was a low stone wall that forced you to circumambulate counterclockwise when you approached the summit, and the top had been scooped out, presumably to accept a drink offering, a libation.
Yeah, I mean, it should come as no surprise that these ideas, just looking at them on their linguistic basis alone, could have had similar origins, particularly because of all the linguistic diffusion that was undoubtedly happening between the Proto-Indo-European world and the Proto-Semitic world. There's a theory called about this diffusion. One of the things that deals with it is linguistic diffusion, but the Arminian hypothesis, which has basically posits that there is this relation between those two worlds, and that groups that came out of them, ostensibly like the Hurrians, like the Sumerians, would have seeded these ideas in the different locations and the different groups that shot off.
Right. Just to reemphasize that there is some linguistic evidence that the Sumerian homeland was not southern Iraq. It was the region between the Caspian and the Black Sea, which, if you've got a biblical worldview as descendants of Noah, that totally makes sense.
Completely. Yeah. We're still dealing with Mesopotamia. I mean, not necessarily the Proto-Indo-European world, but so much of our attention has been directed at southern Mesopotamia because of 200 years of archaeology and people like Layard and his ilk, sort of focusing our attention there in terms of its relationship with the biblical tradition, and certainly that's there. But I think that we're going to find in the years to come that northern Mesopotamia is going to yield more insight onto some of the topics that we're talking about today.
Well, again, certainly that region of the Galilee, coming back to the Holy Land, that Hula Valley was a marshland during the time of Jesus. In fact, down to the 1950s when the Israelis drained it. Again, that valley surrounded by more than 1,000 dolmens, anchored at kind of both ends. The area around Chorazin with about 400 of them, and there's about 400 at the northeast corner near that Shamir kibbutz, including that one with a 50-ton capstone. But they are all over the place, and especially when you go east into the Golan, there's so many that the archaeologist who led the survey of the Golan Heights said it's one big dolmen field. We can't divide them anymore because we don't know where one ends and the next begins. All of this would just be an archaeological curiosity, except that Jesus seems to have paid a lot of attention to this.
He deliberately was going to places where things had happened in the past, and especially in the Galilean ministry, where the pagan things had happened in the past, bad things had happened in the past. And it's almost like he's reclaiming those places. I don't know, in preparation for his own kingdom, which will end up, covering the world or whatever, but he has to start here in the homeland, the motherland of Canaan, which was his according to allotment, according to Deuteronomy. And I just think there's something that really interesting about that it had been taken away, or I mean, we don't know the history of Canaan in terms of divine allotment or whatever until just Genesis or Deuteronomy 32, but it just really does seem to me that that's what Jesus is doing. Every place he goes is deliberate. Every place he goes seems to have some sort of strange background to it. And every one of these seems to also be kind of a declaration of war, whether it's casting out demons, or like I kind of give that metaphor of they're feasting on Leviathan in the feeding the 5,000, or the gates of hell, and or the transfiguration on top of Mount Hermon, calming of the sea, with Brian's great metaphor of Jesus. Well, at least in the walking on the sea episode, which very similar, of Jesus kind of walking and taming Leviathan, that kind of stuff. So, all these things are very deliberate. I had a question for the three of you guys, and I think each of you could kind of ask it in a different, or answer it in a different way. I'm really curious, Brian, about this from your perspective, just as a novelist or writer, fiction, because you incorporate sacred geography a lot in the way that you write, especially the way you did the Nephilim Chronicles stuff. And I guess for you, my question is, how do you think sacred geography works on an imaginative level, or on the level of the soul? Like, why would you put that into your books, other than just maybe, that would happen, whatever, that you're doing something there. You have reasons for why you're doing it. And I'm curious to find out what those would be. And for the other two of you, just to have you think about it, I'm curious about what you think about sacred geography on an historical level, the relationship to past events. We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but then also like on a metaphysical level, is there something going on between the realms of these places that's real and that's significant? So.
Yeah. So for storytelling, I've been having some computer problems here. And I'm hearing some echoes. Okay, I'm good. So for storytelling, I think that, beyond the shallow component of symbolism, which of course is going on in all of it. I do think that there's something about the power of incarnation, so for instance, storytelling itself, I think, has a power of incarnating ideas or claims or what have you. We might sit and have an abstract argument about something, whether it's a theological truth or not, or whatever, any kind of logical, rational arguments that we often have, and which is a part of who we are and part of our pursuit of the discovery of truth. And I think that the abstraction is a part of truth. It's a part of how we were created, as well as the heavenly spiritual dimension of who we are, right? But the earthly incarnation component that storytelling allows us to make a connection to those abstract or spiritual truths that we talk about, and so for me as a storyteller, that's what I'm connecting to. I'm, like for instance, the gates of hell, right? As we've talked about this on the show quite often, the gates of hell, understanding the mythology behind that, and at the foot of Mount Hermon, and how they actually believe when there was a pit in the back in the deep of the cave that they believed went down to the abyss, and how that was sort of connected with Pan. All these sort of components make the spiritual beliefs come alive to us as human beings, even if they're false. And so I think that, Jesus going to that place, for example, the gates of Hades and stuff, of course, we see an actual historic reality to Hermon and the Watchers coming down to Earth. But I think that the mythological component of that is very powerful. And actually going to those geographical locations, actually And as I tell the story, I draw from traditions and legends, and I incorporate them in. I'm not claiming, I wouldn't claim that this is all how it really was and historically or whatever. But as a storyteller, you draw from all these components, these legends and myths and such, because, like I say, it really comes down to they incarnate those spiritual truths that we're trying to talk about. And there's something about us as embodied creations of God that is essential to our nature, So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know if that makes much sense, but and I say that because I come from a very rational background, a very theological orientation, highly into abstraction. For many years in my life, I loved debating and intellectual life and all that kind of stuff. But the artist side of me brought me back into the incarnational component, such that even Christ himself, if you think about it, right? He is both the Word, he is the Word made flesh. So he is both God as the Spirit being God, but infleshed. And so he has that connection between the earthly and the heavenly. He is, in a sense, a holy mountain. He's Mount Zion, But so that incarnational component, the earthly connection, I think is just, it's just crucial to our identity as created beings in God's image, and we can go astray in different ways if we stay abstracted, stay theological, stay rational without bringing in that earthly component. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking about what you just said about Jesus being the cosmic mountain. He talks about how you'll see the angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And well, that's language of Jacob's dream, and really the ziggurat that he's seeing, the cosmic mountain. So he really is calling himself that. There's also something, I think, the world tree going on. Moses writes that anyone is cursed who hangs on a tree. And then that word, tree is actually used. It's not a cross or something, it's a tree. And then Paul talks about that, brings that up in Galatians. And it makes me think of Odin, who hangs himself on Yggdrasil, which is the world tree, the tree of life. And so somehow in the Bible, you've got the mythological component, the ideas of cosmic mountains, world trees, gates to the underrealm, all this kind of stuff, but yet it's historicized in real events and people, and in a God-man who then embodies the totality of what those things mean. And to me, that's just it was super exciting, and the learning about the concreteness of the myth, and then seeing that that's not contradictory to the historicity of the thing. It just brings it alive in so many amazing ways. And
exactly.
I told you yesterday that I'm reading your Gilgamesh, and it's just it's just so powerful. You can even do it with a story like Gilgamesh. No,
I think it's important because I'm heavily into the symbolism. I love symbolism. I see there's a lot of it in the scriptures, and I can see how one can become so caught up into that abstraction in a sense, right? Without, like you're saying, what'd you call it, the historicizing of it,
Something like that. I think I might have made it up. I don't know. No,
it's sort of like the opposite of demythologizing, It's actually making the mythological real. And that's, of course, what, as you mentioned, what C.S. Lewis had talked about. And that's the component I connect to, and absolutely. So it's that, but there's also some element of how much of this is, how much of it is real. No, not how much of it is real. How much of it does have that historical incarnational component, And that's what you guys have been talking about, the dolmens and doing the research and the historical component of it helps bring to light a lot of that, but
it's like, it's not an accident that the Mount Hermon event, Jen and I have been talking about this quite a bit, that happens where it happens. And then you have all this stuff at the bottom of that mountain taking place, whether it's mounds and wheels or dolmens or gates of hell and shrines to Pan. And on the top of Hermon, you have, and that's not an accident. So there's something that's historically related to it.
Yeah.
But also I wonder about like I don't even know how to ask the question, the metaphysical level of it. I kind of ask that almost, is there some kind of, these people thought that the geography, the actual place where they were at really mattered. And what do you guys think? Why do you think that that's the case?
Well, that's a really good question. And that's kind of what we're trying to tease out here. And again, this would all be just historical curiosity for nerds like us, except that Jesus paid attention to it by where he chose to get baptized, where he chose to declare his divinity, both at the base of Mount Hermon and then with the transfiguration at the summit. But what was it about those regions that made them so important? I mean, we know from the Canaanite texts, or the Ugaritic texts rather, from around 1200 BC, that region was significant to the people in the region as well. And as Canaanite religion pointed to Mount Hermon and to the Hula Marsh as significant. One of the events in the Baal cycle takes place there, where he makes love to a heifer. And
putting it mildly,
yeah. It's like 88 times, I think, is in the story.
Yeah. And wasn't it rape too? I don't know, whatever.
Well, I don't know. I mean, can a cow say no? I mean, the Sea of Galilee, which is in the Epic of Akkad, and this has just recently come out within the last 20 years or so. Scholars have been arguing over it, and finally better pictures of the tablet were taken and said, oh, yeah, that's what that says. So the young man, Akkad, who's killed by the order of the war goddess Anat, the father, Daniel, finds him and says, I will bury him in a tomb for the underworld gods at Kinneret. So, 1,200 years before Jesus, there was something significant about Mount Hermon, with the Rephaim being summoned to the threshing floor of El, and Akkad being buried in a tomb for the underworld gods, the Elohim Eretz. That's not the word; those aren't the words in Ugaritic, but they're the cognates. So, what was it about that region? I did a presentation a few years ago and speculated that maybe there's something about that rift, the Dead Sea Transform, scholars call it, which runs from, it's part of that rift that runs all the way from, I don't know, Tanzania in Africa, all the way up to Turkey. But the Dead Sea Transform runs from the Red Sea up through the Arava. It's the valley that causes the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, the Sea of Galilee, Lake Hula, the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, all the way up into Turkey. And so many supernatural things have happened on or within a few miles either way of that rift. I mean, Mount Hermon is right next to it. The Hula Valley is there, of course, where you'd all these dolmens around, and just east of there, you've got this massive necropolis called Bashan. Jesus based his ministry at Capernaum after getting baptized, probably just outside Bethsaida. The pigs from, the demonic, encounter at Gadara was on the east shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus walked across the water, stilled the storm. Of course, you've got Jerusalem just to the west of it, Jericho there, Sodom is right there. Even where Jacob wrestled the angel of the Lord at Mahanaim is just about 10 miles east of there, towards Amman, Jordan. I mean, really, when you look at the Bible, almost every major supernatural event, aside from, say, the Tower of Babel, even the parting of the Red Sea, depending on where you put that event, happened on or very near that rift. Because if you're looking at Mount Hermon and asking, why did the angels descend there? Well, it's a really tall mountain. Yeah, it is for Israel, but it's not one of the 100 tallest mountains on earth. If you go back to Mesopotamia, you just go over east into Persia, and there are many much taller mountains, or further north. I mean, Noah landed on a much taller mountain. Why didn't they go to Ararat? So what is it about that rift? Speculation, but is that rift perhaps a remnant of something in the pre-flood era, the subduing of chaos, or the place where the Watchers were cast into the underworld, to Tartarus?
Possibly. I mean, that's just to sort of tie a bow on this. That that's why sacred geography is so useful, because it does anchor all of this supernatural stuff, or certainly has the potential to anchor all of the supernatural stuff into the physical and cultural geography of the known world, of the seen world. And that's why I think the work that Doug and I are doing right now, like I said, we talk just about every day of the week, right? At least every other day of the week this week. It's really exciting, because you're dealing with, as C.S. Lewis put it, the myth that's true, and all of us to one degree have talked about over the last several years the amount of historicity contained in mythology. Those nuggets are there, and the farther back in time you go, the more the line that we draw, that intellectual compartmentalization that we put myth into on the one side and history into the one side, that's really not how the increasingly ancient and prehistoric peoples thought. So,
I'll have Judd talk about this in a minute, as one of two examples that have been fun for me this week, just in learning. And he was talking about the Clash of the Titans, the early 80s movie, and kind of the geography of where that takes place. So keep that in your mind, Judd, and you bring that up. But my kind of aha moment this week was, or maybe it was last week, was seeing the connections between Psalm 87, Psalm 88, Psalm 89, and the whole Confession of Peter and Transfiguration. So there's like at least 20 different linguistic connections between those stories, just in Psalm 89 alone, that lots of scholars have seen kind of pieces of it. And so I was kind of playing around with it, and seeing Psalm 89 is a kind of a cryptic prophecy of Jesus' need to go to this place and declare his founding of his church. So the church is one of the connections that's there. In Psalm 89, there's the ecclesia, and it's the ecclesia of heaven. It's the divine council. And here you have in Matthew 16, Jesus says, "On my church, the gates of hell will not prevail against my church." So it's like there's a contrast going on between the Psalms church in the skies with these watchers, and then his church that he's going to start this war here right at this place. And this goes with both those stories, so the confession and then the transfiguration. So I'm talking with Judd about this, and I say, what's interesting is that Rahab comes up in both Psalm 87 and Psalm 89, and then in the middle, Psalm 88. And I think that those three Psalms were meant to be read together for various reasons. Psalm 88 is all about this almost a prophecy of somebody dying in this watery, drowning kind of a torrent way. And so you have Rahab on either side. And I said, it's just so weird that it seems like Leviathan showed up in the feeding of the 5,000 right before it. Now you have Rahab. And he goes, well, that Caesarea Philippi on old maps was called Bet Rahab. I'm like, you got to be kidding. And not only that, Derek, because I see what you're doing. You had just been talking about this Rift Valley. It wasn't just the place, but it was actually that valley right north of the Hula. That whole region was called Bet Rahab. So Judd can tell you a little bit more about that. And then I wanted to tell you about the Clash of the Titans and how that fits into this too, because it's just really interesting and it completely fits with sacred geography.
Yeah, as Doug was going through the Rahab material, it dawned on me that the older names of that place was Beth Rahab. And again, you can move the vowels around a little bit here. What's of significance are the consonants in the word, but it's not only the place name of that region, the Panaion, that the Greeks, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids would eventually dub it, but it's that moving into this valley on the west side of that slope of Mount Hermon. And if you'll pardon the pun, it snakes into the Hula Valley. So here you have not only the place names associated with the word Rahab or Rahab. But there's not only the serpentine Leviathan imagery there, but Rahab also means prideful or insolent. So Beth Rahab literally means house of the prideful or house of the insolent.
So this becomes the original Pride Month. When Jesus is going to that place and they're at the Lupercalia Festival and the Parentalia, it's all about their pride and the things they were doing. And Jesus says, enough of that.
and doesn't the Leviathan chapter in Job say that Leviathan is the king of the sons of pride?
Oh, there you go. Exactly. So, Judd, there's the Clash of the Titans thing. You were talking about them landing in that movie, landing over by the coast and then making their way up.
So, yeah, a couple of years ago, I did an episode of Antiquity X on my channel, just kind of taking a look at this, because who doesn't love the 1981 version of Clash of the Titans?
Oh, yeah.
Ray Harryhausen, baby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although,
Burgess Meredith.
It is hard to beat Liam Neeson yelling, "Release the Kraken!"
Yeah, that's true. But you got to give it. I mean, who was it? It was Laurence Olivier.
Laurence Olivier, yeah.
Right. So, but anyway, now there are some liberties that are taken in the movie, of course, with the entire story of Perseus. But what's interesting? So there are some directorial, production and decisions. I'm sure writing decisions. But they have Perseus end up in Joppa, which of course is on the coast of the Levant. And so he has to go, one of the things he has to do is he has to,
and Joppa, by the way, just to stop for a second, Joppa is where Jonah takes off from.
That's right.
With the whale,
right.
Yep. So as I'm fond of saying to Doug, there's that. And he's one of the things that Perseus has to do is he has to consult these three witches that live in this mountain that are based on the Greek Graii, the Grey sisters. But he has to travel inland to do it, and he crosses a series of marshes. Well, if you're moving inland from Joppa, and you're going to end up, you're moving towards a mountainous area, you're going to pass through ostensibly the Hula Valley. So I thought that's kind of interesting. And the imagery of the three sisters, well, there are three peaks to Mount Hermon.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've never been able to confirm it, but I always thought that it was interesting that so much of the action of this story is taking place in this region, in Upper Galilee and the southern Lebanon. And then there's a figure, a villain in the movie who's actually not really part of the Greek story, but there's a figure called Caliban or Calibos, who's actually based on a character from The Tempest, if I'm not mistaken, who is this satyr-like creature. Again, this interesting imagery that, as the four of us know, and many of the listeners and others in our field know, about the association of the satyr, the Shedim, with this region, notably in the iconic figure of Pan, and the other goat gods like Odds and Uds and Adzaga in the region that were worshipped by the Amorites. So I always thought that there's some interesting things going on in Clash of the Titans just outside of let's just say the Greek venue of Greek mythology.
And that's interesting because I've concluded over the last couple of years that the Greeks were in the Levant way earlier than we give them credit for. I probably mentioned this before. The Hivites were the Achaean Greeks, the Mycenaean Greeks. And the Hivites show up as early as Abraham, but Joshua has to do battle with them, and they're located in the vicinity of Baal Hermon.
Right. And the archaeological record of the Galilee speaks to Mycenaean presence. There have been Mycenaean pit graves, pit tombs that have been found in different parts of the Galilee too. So yeah, clearly they were there early on.
Interesting. And again, this may be a rabbit trail, but speaking of where supernatural things have occurred in that region, the destruction of Sodom, which, if the team from Trinity Southwest University is correct, is located 8 miles northeast of the Sea of Galilee at a site called Tal El Hammam. You can see it from the from Mount Nebo.
Northeast or southeast?
Northeast.
Oh, the sea.
Yeah, northeast of the Dead Sea. I'm sorry, northeast of the Dead Sea.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that they've not published this, but Dr. Stephen Collins told us when we went down to the International Symposium on Archaeology in the Bible, which we're going back to, by the way. Sharon and I have already booked our spot in August for that, or September for that event. That the pottery that they found is Minoan. So, that's really interesting. They've got. Well, I guess I'm not cleared to say that. Anyway, he was telling us some stuff that they've not published yet. So, but we would really like to know who were the people of Sodom, assuming that this is the location. I mean, it's a city destroyed in the Middle Bronze Age by something that blew over all the buildings in one direction. So it wasn't an earthquake. But the pottery being Minoan and dated to about 1750 BC is really interesting, because we tend to look at what goes on in Israel in the Bible as though it happened in a silo, except for when the Egyptians or the Babylonians or the Assyrians or the Syrians or the Edomites, whatever, attacked. We don't stop to think that some of these groups that were there when Joshua started pushing them out might actually have come from somewhere else in the Mediterranean, like, around the Aegean or maybe even further west. You've got Greek myths that are connected to sites in the Levant, like the story of Typhon connected to Mount Zaphon. There are those scholars who believe that Typhon, the chaos monster of the Greeks, was named for Mount Zaphon, which is near Antioch in what is now Turkey. But you've also got that really interesting inscription that was found in the temple on the summit of Mount Hermon, a reference to the Watchers event, inscribed in Greek and probably dated to the classical period. No more than 300 years before the birth of Christ, and maybe even into the Christian era. So even as far west as Greece and Rome, they knew there was something about this region. I mean, Baalbek, the biggest temple to Jupiter in the Roman Empire, was not in Rome. It was at, Baalbek. Why?
Well, and you have the Babylonians in the old Babylonian version of the Gilgamesh epic. Right. Talking about Mount Hermon being the home of the gods. And I was looking last night, there are some local Lebanese legends that Nimrod, they seem to be confusing myths, but Nimrod somehow tried to catch an eagle and fly his way up to heaven, and he failed. And his body was impaled on Mount Hermon. Huh. So why would you have... I mean, there's localizing of stories. I get that, but it's, Gilgamesh and Enkidu, they go and they kill the demon Humbaba right there at the base of Mount Hermon. Right. And this is a Eastern myth coming from Sumer. So
yeah, he was the guardian of the Lebanon forest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's called in that old Babylonian copy, the epic, the secret dwelling of the Anunnaki. Which by the time of Abraham, the Anunnaki had been demoted to the netherworld, which again gets back to that connection between Bashan and that region and the underworld.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if we've figured out the why, but I mean, there's certainly a lot of historical evidence of the what. I mean, Babylon is it's about a 3-month walk to get to Mount Hermon in the time of Abraham, anyway.
Yeah, so, and don't take it through the desert.
No. So there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there was something known from Babylon to Greece anyway, that there was something special about that region from Mount Zaphon in the north down to, the region of Mount Moriah, Jerusalem. I mean, as far back as Abraham, God sent Abraham to that particular peak in Jerusalem, which probably signaled to the principalities and powers behind the scenes that, hey, something important is going to happen here. Let's keep an eye on that site. And sure enough, there was. But why this is, don't know. But it is interesting that the people in the ancient world seem to know it. I mean, the story of Naaman, the servant of the king of Syria, who was healed of leprosy by the prophet Elisha and took 2 donkey loads of dirt back to Syria with him so he could worship Yahweh even when he was not on the territory of Yahweh. And David, who was lamenting the fact that Saul was trying to chase him out of Israel so that he would have to go serve other gods. So there's a lot more connected up in this idea than we can untangle in the course of an hour. But the fact is, there are certain places on this earth. I hesitate to use the word portals because that seems to get back into, the territory of okay, what the Norway spiral and stuff like that. But you can't deny that there are certain places on this earth that Jesus pointed to during his ministry that were supernaturally supercharged. And for whatever reason, he didn't come to earth and say, okay, all this stuff about Mount Hermon never happened. Forget it. Doesn't matter. No, that's not what he did. He went to Mount Hermon and made a point of declaring his divinity there. I guess just let wrap up with just throwing this question around one time. That being the case, why did he do that rather than just say none of that matters anymore because I'm here and the kingdom of heaven is coming close behind me? Who wants to take a stab at that one first?
Well, what better way to make it as tangible as you possibly can than to, for me personally as a scholar on my journey, that really begins with Aeneas. And the events, or it's at Caesarea Philippi, and the events, when Jesus and the disciples visit there. And now we're finding out that these other places have these older arcane significances as well. What better way for not only Jesus's direct audience, his followers, but for us on this side of history that have the the provenance and blessing to have access to all of this scholarship and all of these new finds and new directions in these fields to shed light on these passages in terms of what's going on. Again, it's all about anchoring, the unseen realm to these points, historical points in the seen realm.
Brian, you want to take a stab at that? Why did Jesus pay attention to these locations?
What he said. No, I yield my time to Doug.
Oh, brother. My thought goes to the Lord's Prayer. God didn't make us just spirit, and he didn't make us just body. We're not just material. We're not just spirit. We're this connection. And that's not just true of us, but of his entire creation. And so if there was like a transgression of the law in those older days and horrible things took place in these particular, locations, and Jesus then comes along and says, with my kingdom, I'm bringing it and it's going to come into this world. And you can spiritualize the kingdom because the kingdom of God is within you, that sort of thing. And I get that. But the kingdom also has a tangible physical presence. I mean, each of us is in a location right now where we're at. And in the location where we're at, we're supposed to be making a difference where we're at. And I think actually all views of eschatology in terms of the final idea of the kingdom, they all have the idea in there of there needing to be this harmony between the spirit realm and the physical realm. How we get there, we might disagree, but it seems to me that Jesus is teaching us to pray on earth as it is in heaven. And there's these places that that were transgressing heaven's rules on earth. Then why wouldn't he go and kind of cleanse it or make war against it or start building his kingdom from those very places as kind of a not just a sign, but a reclamation of the beginning, a reclamation of taking back what was always his to begin with.
Well
Yeah.
said.
I was going to say, I think the phrase heaven and earth is what it's a strong phrase throughout the scriptures, and it supports what you're just saying, Doug, where, of course, there's a physicality to it, but I think that it's more than that. It's the heaven and earth and the uniting of heaven and earth, and it's primarily a covenantal term all throughout the scriptures. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that I think that the creation of the heaven and the earth in Genesis 1, that is the writer is using creation of a physical heaven and earth actually as the metaphor for the covenant.
I totally agree.
You know what I mean? And so,
Yep.
And you see it throughout
Jeremiah
the
says as much.
Yeah.
The covenant God made with the day and the night. So
Yeah. So the idea there being that what you're saying is true is and the summing up of heaven and earth. So it is a kind of what we would call or maybe we see, and might be a little vulgar to see it as the physical and the spiritual, because the terms they saw it in were earthly and heavenly. And heavenly does, of course, heavenly doesn't just mean up there, it's the realm of God, the realm of the spirit realm or whatever. So, there's a beauty to that, I think. There's that unity again of heaven and earth, and that's why these physical things like geography matter, certainly, to God.
And when everything is restored and made new, there is a new heaven and a new earth. Reset.
And even in the new covenant, that's the new covenant itself is the making new of these things. We are new creations in Christ right now. And so we are to be the embodiment of what we're talking about. We become sacred geography because we're the temple of God. And we bring the kingdom with us wherever we are.
Amen and amen. Once again, another fascinating discussion from Iron and Myth. Pastor Doug Van Dorn, Brian Godawa, Dr. Judd Burton. Guys, this is really a privilege and an honor to get to do this with you guys every month, and look forward to our next time together.
Amen. Look
to the show notes for links to the websites for Doug, Brian, and Judd. As always, we recommend their work highly, and it is a privilege to get to talk to these guys on a regular basis about these subjects. Coming up, we've got a new conference to tell you about, a small little gathering in North Dakota, and the United Church of Christ would like you to know that it is very, very sorry for not being sufficiently anti-racist. That, as we bring you another Bless Their Pointy Little Heads straight ahead on A View from the Bunker. We've recorded a lot of video over the last 8 years, and we're truly thankful that so many of you have been blessed by our teachings, presentations, our travel-augumentaries of our tours through Israel. But sending videos to other parts of the world can get expensive, so we've now made all of our video content available on demand. Stream our video in full HD with instant access at gilberthouse.org/video. And during the months of May and June, you can save 20% with promo code VIDEO20 at checkout. That's VIDEO20. Video on demand for as little as $3 for 7 days access and 20% off with promo code VIDEO20. But if you prefer DVDs, that promo code works for you too. Log on to gilberthouse.org/store, use VIDEO20 at checkout, and save 20% on all DVDs. 20% off all streaming video and DVDs with promo code VIDEO20 at gilberthouse.org. Talking the walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at vftb.net. That is the website for this podcast, but you can find all of our work at gilberthouse.org, gilberthouse.org. And again, put /app on that and get our free app for iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle, Fire phones and tablets, or if you prefer, the Roku edition to throw stuff right to your big screen. Social media. Twitter at View From Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. Facebook View From the Bunker, and the new social media sites Truth Social, Gab Me We Getter at Derek P. Gilbert. Well, the United Church of Christ, which is a denomination I'm actually a little familiar with because That was the church we attended, or the church we attended when I was a kid was a member of the UCC. But remember, when I was a kid, that was back, 50 years ago. So that's been a little while. And things have changed a little bit in the UCC since then. The UCC is the denomination that just a few years ago very proudly brought to its national convention the first all-transgender gospel choir. And now it is because they have fully bought into the message of the God of this world, the spirit of the age. Now, if you think that's Satan, okay, we can go along with that. We'd suggest that there's another spirit that may even be more influential, at least as far as these sorts of agendas are concerned. Inanna, the ancient Sumerian deity who was praised in Sumerian hymns for being able to change men into women and women into men. Anyway, UCC is all on board with this modern agenda. It put out a new calendar, a desk calendar and plan book for July of 23 through December of 2024, 16-month desk calendar. And it wanted to be very inclusive in the cover art. And, nothing wrong with that. We want to show a diverse group of people getting together. As Paul wrote, there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for we are all one in Christ Jesus. You accept Jesus Christ, and those differences no longer matter. Unless you're serving a different agenda. After the UCC put out this calendar, and I'll put the image on the screen here, it then followed with an apology to the family and friends of the United Church of Christ. I write to apologize for the ways in which the most recent edition of the UCC desk calendar failed to live up to our commitments to be an anti-racist body. It has been brought to my attention that a slight rotation of the cover image in either direction would more accurately reflect the racial equity we seek. I am grateful for such attention to the subtleties of racism and agree. Well, as you can see then, what has obviously triggered some members of the United Church of Christ is that the two white kids, the girl on top and the boy at the 6 o'clock position, are in the center of the image. So in order to make this sufficiently woke, we needed to rotate the image slightly so that it would be children of color featured in the center of image rather than white kids. Look, it's a diverse group showing all skin colors and a mix of boys and girls, equal number of each. But that's not good enough when you're woke. And I will say this about the word woke, because I've heard from African Americans, believers in Jesus Christ, who are offended at the way that word is used because it has a certain meaning in the black community that derives from their historic struggle against racism here in the United States. And I understand that, but sadly, that is how the word is now being used. It has been co-opted by so-called progressives in this country. And maybe it's lazy on my part to use the word as a shortcut to convey a certain meaning, but that's essentially it in a nutshell. It's insufficiently anti-racist to put the white kids at 12, 6, 3, and 9 and rotating one way or the other to more prominently feature the children of color would be acceptable in today's America. But this, as it stands, is not. A quote from Oron McIntyre summarizes this: progressivism will hollow out your religion and wear its skin like a trophy. Amen to that. And to the United Church of Christ, we say, bless your pointy little heads. Well, we just got back, as we're recording this, from a wonderful weekend at His Call Ministries in Sparta, Missouri. We are already making plans to go back next June, which means we go back next June. We'll have more new video and audio and images that we can share from next year's Israel tour, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. So our thanks to Alec and Ginny Wade of His Call Ministries, Joyce Stevenson for helping to put that together. An intimate gathering, but by next year, they're planning to have a new education center together that will hold more than the 100 or so people at the current facility, which is their home, literally their home, can hold. The new education center will be able to seat hundreds, and we are looking forward to really putting out the word next year and trying to draw a crowd because, again, it's a wonderful gathering, and people from all different backgrounds, all different denominations and traditions. And so there's a real wonderful breaking down of barriers, let's say, between backgrounds taking place at His Call Ministries. They're really, Alec and Jenny, really being faithful in listening to what the Lord is asking them to do and then following it at an age when, quite frankly, most people would just say, look, let's just enjoy our retirement. No, they are continuing to work and run the race right up until the finish line or the final bell. Anyway, coming up in July, we will be in Ohio and Brookville, Ohio. I finally got the little notice on the screen fixed. I guess it's over here. So thank you for letting me know about that. Brookville, Ohio, that's just outside Dayton, at the Harvest Revival Center. Pastor Neil Peterson's church will be there with Ellie Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, our good friend Pastor Casper McLeod, Kenny C., Spiritual Warriors, Thomas Dunn, and Vicki Joy Anderson, Dr. Michael Lake. Man, this is such a lineup here. Randy Conway, David Paxson. We love those men both. And Nathan Branham, looking forward to hearing him for the first time. And we hope you join us. This is a wonderful facility that can hold hundreds. So please join us July 28th and 29th in Ohio at the Go Therefore Conference. Dr. Mike Spalding, Mike and Kathy Spalding putting this together. You can reserve your spot now at gothereforeconference.com. That's gothereforeconference.com. Now, coming up in October, going to a small event in Valley City, North Dakota. And I'm interested to do this because that's my mother's home state. I haven't been in North Dakota since I was 13. She was raised in Wells County, just outside the town of Harvey. So this is in the eastern part of the state, a lot closer to Fargo. But looking forward to it. It's called the Pitchfork and Hoe Gathering. And I'll be honored to speak on the kinds of things that Sharon and I have been researching, the reality of giants, gods, and dragons in the Bible. And if you're in the area, we will hope to see you there as well. Have more details coming as soon as we get them from the organizers, but this will be the last Saturday in October, which I believe is October 28th. And I can remember that date because that's Sharon's birthday, but she's very graciously said, go. We love to teach. And so the opportunity is presented and a chance to see my mom's home state again. So looking forward to that. More details on that coming. We'll be in Israel next spring, God willing, with our special guest, Timothy Alberino. The dates, March 31st through April 9th, and then tack onto that 3 extra days to join us in Jordan for the optional extension, where we go to Mount Nebo, see what Moses saw when he got his only look at the Promised Land. From there, we will show you the prophesied end of the war of Gog and Magog, the Valley of the Travelers east of the sea, and the site of ancient Sodom, which you can also see from Mount Nebo. That and more. Of course, Petra, which is a bucket list item. And we've got information already online, but there are already, we are told, about a dozen people who've registered for next year's tour. That's the Alberino effect, I'm sure. So join us in Israel next year. More information online, gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com, or gilberthouse.org/travel. Either way, there are links that will take you directly to the Lipkin Tours website and where you can reserve your spot and put down a deposit. Speaking of Aaron Lipkin, the CEO of Lipkin Tours, I didn't put this in my notes, but it just occurred to me I should probably let you know about this. He will be joining us on the panel at the Jim Bakker Show on July 25th. We had shared with a friend down there at Morningside who is helps to book guests for the program that Aaron Lipkin is coming to the States. And we showed some of the video and audio, some of the video drone footage that Aaron had taken for us during our tour in March, and then explained that this is what Aaron does. He's got a line of DVDs, a series that shows the archaeology of Israel and how it confirms the Bible. So God bless him. They booked Aaron to come down on the 25th. And since we're close by, we'll be there on the panel as well. And this is free and open to the public. So if you're in the Ozarks and you'd like to hear a little from Aaron Lipkin personally, now he's also still putting together his tour schedule, speaking schedule for this summer. If your church is interested, you can go to lipkintours.com to find out more and see if there's still time to schedule Aaron to speak to your church. But if not, you can join us at Morningside in Blue Eye, Missouri on July 25th. That's a Tuesday. Taping starts at 11, probably go to about 2:33, somewhere in there. 2 programs probably. And again, it is free and open to the public. And we are delighted to share with the world what we already know, which is that Aaron is a wonderful evangelist for his home country, but also for showing how archaeology, the evidence in the stones, confirms the Bible. The stones are crying out. So join us July 25th. You can find all that information on our website, gilberthouse.org. And when we finally get information on the Gilbert House tour of Turkey next spring, we will share that with you. And we pray that we can make that happen because Turkey is open again. There's still some areas recovering, but the main sites we wanted to see, like Göbekli Tepe, are open. So as soon as we've got information from the tour company and confirmed things, we will get with you on that. Meanwhile, if you get a spare moment and you can leave a review for us at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are sold, we would certainly appreciate that. Thank you again for your time in listening or watching to this program. Our announcer, the inimitable D.C. Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0. 4.0, mind you. Non-commercial license. International license, that is. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.